Buongiorno, welcome to Jane's Kitchen. Today we're going to make a recipe out of one of my favorite cookbooks called Extra Virgin that you can buy at the Village Bookshop in Bayfield, Ontario, or you can order it on their website and have it delivered to your home. They also have lots of other cookbooks as well as a lot of other reading books. But today we're going to make a lasagna alla bolognese out of this book. It's fairly easy. It does take a little bit of time. A little bit of prep time, but other than that, it's fairly easy. So let's get started. So first things first, the cook always needs to have just a little bit of red wine, because today we're going to be cooking with red wine, and it doesn't have to be any $50 bottle of wine, just a nice everyday Italian red wine, or just a red wine that you really like. So cheers. And what we're going to do here is we're going to chop up about 2 stalks of celery, a couple of carrots, a whole red onion, some fresh parsley, some pancetta, chopped garlic, which doesn't really call for in the recipe, but I like the garlic, 2 pounds of ground beef, and a pound of ground pork. Another really important thing is to make sure that you have some really good San Marzano Italian tomatoes. And you can put those in a blender, or I like to use the immersion blender because it cleans up really well and it's really easy to use. Just a couple of swirls of olive oil in the bottom of a really nice Dutch oven that is good size, because this is going to make a lot of sauce, and you can freeze some of the sauce if you don't use all of it in the lasagna, or you can just use it all in the lasagna. In goes the pancetta. Get that going. Some red onion. Carrots. It seems like a lot of vegetables, but they're going to cook down really nicely. So it's going to give it a lot of really great flavor. And whatever falls on the floor, you just call your dog in the kitchen and they can just eat it all up. Here it's sizzling away. Get yourself a really nice wooden spoon, or a wooden spatula if you want to call it that. And just let this saute for about 10, 12, 15 minutes, just until the pancetta gets nice and crispy. So this has been cooking for about 8 minutes or so. Probably got about another 5 to 6 to 7 minutes left. I think we're ready to put the meat in here. 2 pounds of ground beef. And I like to sort of get this chopped up a little bit, get it going. And then just throw in, don't leave the paper on the pork, that would not be good. So this is going to take a few minutes as well, because you have to really get this meat browned. So I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit. And just keep chopping with your wooden spatula, which is a really great little tool. Just stirring it around. Takes a little bit of muscle. The recipe actually calls for ground veal, ground pork, and ground beef, but I prefer to just use the ground pork and the ground beef. I also have made this with ground turkey, which is really wonderful. So whatever you like. More meat, less meat. You don't have to put as much meat in as if you don't want to. But I'm going to follow the recipe pretty closely today. So the meat's getting browned up very nicely, and you want to just really continue to chop it up, because you don't want to have big, huge chunks. You don't want to have meatballs in your lasagna. You want to have some nice chunks of meat, but you don't want it to be so overbearing that all you get is a big bite of meat. And notice I haven't put my garlic in there yet, because I didn't want to brown my garlic so it would burn. So I'm going to go ahead and put the garlic in and the parsley. And the other thing that I like to do is I have a little bit of sauce left in this can. Just a little bit. It's just a thing I do. Pouring the red wine in there, swish it around, swish, swish. So I get all that good little bits of tomato sauce, right? And I'm gonna just pour that red wine all over the meat. And that's gonna cook down until the alcohol evaporates, probably 10 minutes. So now the sauce is just bubbling just a little bit, and you don't want it on really high, just a nice little simmer. And one thing you don't want to do is don't put the lid on all the way, because you want this to cook down and you don't want evaporation to form, water to fall in the sauce. So what I do is I just put just a little bit of a jar so that you keep the splatter down, but it gets to breathe. And just let that cook and stir it every once in a while for about 2 hours. So the sauce has been cooking for a couple of hours now, and it looks absolutely beautiful. And just going to give it a quick little stir. And you have to taste the sauce. Taste a little bit to see if it needs a little salt. Oh my gosh, that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. So the sauce is all done. Next thing to do is to make our bechamel sauce. So I've melted some butter here. You just get that melted. And then you just sprinkle this is about 4 tablespoons of butter, unsalted. Then you just sprinkle about 1/4 cup of flour. And you stir that around in the butter. It's really good to use a whisk. Get all those lumps out. This needs to cook for about a minute or so, just to get that flour taste out, and also to get the lumps out of the flour. And this lasagna is not your traditional that has a lot of mozzarella and ricotta, and the bechamel sauce will replace that. But we are going to put some grated cheese in it, so we'll get to that in a few minutes. Let that stir a little bit, let it cook down. Heat up just a little bit. And then I have about 2 1/4 cups of milk. I'm using, you can use whole milk, which is fine. And you heat this up. And then you're going to just slowly stir it in with the butter and flour. Just like that. And then you're going to stir it for about another 5 minutes or so until it gets thick. It's going to be like a nice little thick white sauce. So it's been about 5 minutes, and the sauce, as you can see, is getting nice and thick, just the way I like it. The way you can tell is just put a spoon in there, and if it coats the back of the spoon, that's ready. And this is the time that you want to add some salt. Give it a little bit of flavor, just a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. I like the pepper, and just going to do about 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. And if you don't like nutmeg, leave it out. It just takes it over the edge just a little bit. And I think the bechamel sauce is ready. So now we're going to assemble the lasagna. We're getting close to the end. And the first thing you want to do is just put a layer of the sauce down, the Bolognese sauce. And we're going to use these oven-ready lasagna noodles. You don't have to boil them, no cooking, they'll cook right in the sauce, right in the lasagna. And you're going to take these and just put about 3 of these down. And the thing you want to do is make sure that there's sauce covering that so that it does cook. Then we're going to take the bechamel. Just put a little blob there, a little blob there. Don't worry, I'm going to spread this out. I just get myself a little spatula, spread it out all across the noodles. Just like that. These rubber spatulas are so handy for that. It's kind of like icing a cake in a way. And we just want to cover every little spot. Get a little bit more. And make sure you set up your stations so that you have everything in the order in which you're going to put the ingredients together. And the other thing that I do is this recipe calls for Parmigiano Reggiano cheese, but I like to do a mixture of, I just grate this in my food processor. This is a mixture of Romano and Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. Just gives it a little bit of flavor. Then you're going to sprinkle generously with this cheese. And this is the only cheese that goes in this lasagna. So you just, as much as you think you'd like, this will really give it a lot of really nice flavor. I'm just going to take this little guy and spread it a little bit more. So now we're back to sauce, noodles, bechamel, cheese. So now I've layered the lasagna, and I have 3 layers with 3 layers of noodles, and the very last step is to just put a layer of sauce. Need to pick this up. Put a layer of sauce on the top, rest of that, spread it all out across the top. And then what we're going to do after this is just put the very last bit of bechamel. And you're just going to sort of swirl the bechamel and the sauce together, just to give it a little bit of really nice taste. So here's your bechamel. I need to pick that up. And if it's a little messy, it doesn't really matter. Sometimes the messier the better. And I love to use a spatula to get every little bit out of the pan. And then you're just going to swirl that right in with the sauce. And just to make it kind of looks messy, but it's going to come out so nice. Getting all the corners, the little nooks and crannies. It looks pretty good, I'd say. And then just a little scant sprinkle of Parmigiano Reggiano on the top. And just cover it. So there's lots of cheese in this lasagna. It's just a little bit different than doing a lot of mozzarella and ricotta. And then I just sort of sprinkle a little bit right here. I missed a spot. And I've already preheated the oven to 375. So we're gonna put this on a pan so that if it bubbles over, we don't get it all over our stove. 375 into the oven. Just like that. For about 30-35 minutes or until it starts to bubble. Oh, it's bubbling. Look at that. That's just what you want to see. Oh, look at all those bubbles. Beautiful. Oh, so that took about 30-35 minutes, and it's bubbling just like the book says, the recipe says. And so the one thing you want to do, you want to make sure you let this sit and rest for a good 15-20 minutes. Never cut into it when it's bubbling like that. And you're probably going to have some leftover sauce. So I suggest you put it in a freezer bag, label it, stick it in the freezer, and then you'll have another meal that you can serve this wonderful sauce with some tagliatelle. Don't use an angel hair pasta, use something that's a little bit thicker, has more substance. Tagliatelle is wonderful. And I love all the recipes in this book, but I really enjoy this recipe a lot. And if you like this book as much as I do, you can go to the Bayfield, Ontario Village Bookshop and order it online. or go visit if you're up in Lake Huron in Bayfield, Ontario. So just pour yourself a glass of vino rosso and manja manja.